Look up at the night sky. That instinct, the one built into you before language, before reason, before any thought you can put into words, tells you that what you are seeing is permanent. Those stars were burning before your grandparents were born. They burned before the first human hand pressed its outline against a cave wall 30,000 years ago. They burned before the oceans formed, before the continents stopped drifting, before any creature capable of registering light had evolved eyes to receive it. And your instinct says, they will still be burning long after every trace of you has been absorbed back into the earth. The sky is the one thing that does not share your problem. That instinct is wrong. The universe is dying. Not eventually, not philosophically, and not in some comfortable abstraction that keeps the real weight at a safe distance. Right now, tonight, at this moment, in the sky above your roof, the universe is measurably, physically, irreversibly losing its capacity to make light. It has been losing that capacity for 10 billion years. It has no mechanism for recovery. The burning goes one way, and it has been going that way for longer than the Earth has existed. And here is the thing that changes everything. The death of the universe is not about astronomy. It is about you, about what your life means in a cosmos that carries exactly the same burden you carry, about what the parallel between your arc and its arc reveals, once you can see it clearly, about why being alive and mortal in this specific moment is not a misfortune. It is the most extraordinary position any conscious being has ever occupied. Stay with me. If you want to understand why the universe's mortality changes how you inhabit every hour you have left, subscribe, not for the physics lesson, for what happens when you discover that you and the cosmos are running the same arc. That shift in perspective is not temporary. Once it lands, it changes the texture of every ordinary morning for the rest of your life. You will never look at the sky the same way again, and you will not want to. And now we begin, without pause, without setup, because the first question is not what is dying out there in the dark. The question is, what does it have in common with you? And the answer is going to require us to start not with a telescope, but with a party you almost did not attend. Imagine meeting a stranger at a party who says very little all evening. You notice them once, twice, a third time. There is something in their face that is familiar, but you cannot place the resemblance. They are not someone you know, but they remind you of someone or something that you cannot identify. Then, late in the evening, at the coat rack by the door, they say one sentence, not a dramatic revelation, just a plain statement about something they have been carrying. And in the span of a breath, you understand. They have been through the same thing you have. A loss you thought was yours alone. A grief you had never been able to explain to anyone because it was too specific, too private, too bound up in the particular shape of your particular life. And in that moment, the dynamic between you transforms completely. You are not strangers. You were never strangers. You were both carrying the same invisible weight, and neither of you knew the other existed. That is what happens when you learn what the universe is actually doing right now. You recognize it, not intellectually, in your body. You have been looking at this sky your whole life, this supposedly permanent, supposedly indifferent, supposedly eternal sky, and you have never known that it is doing precisely what you are doing. Using up its fuel, running through its supply of the raw material it needs to keep making light, moving, without any possibility of reversal, toward an end it did not choose and cannot prevent. Let me show you exactly what I mean. And let me start with what the universe actually looked like when it was young. The universe was born approximately 13.8 billion years ago. In its first moments, there were no stars, only hydrogen and helium and the residual heat of creation, spreading outward through an expanding darkness with nothing yet complex enough to illuminate it. The cosmos was hot but lightless, full of energy, but empty of structure. It was, if you want a word for it, potential, an almost incomprehensible amount of raw material with no form yet given to it. For the first few 100 million years, the universe was dark, not the comfortable dark of a room with the curtains closed, the absolute dark of a cosmos in which light had not yet found anything to cling to. Stars had not yet ignited, planets had not yet formed, chemistry had not yet produced anything more complex than hydrogen atoms drifting in the expanding void. The universe existed in its most fundamental state, pure potential, pure matter, pure darkness, and it had, as yet, no way to know it. Then gravity began its patient work. It pulled hydrogen together. Clouds collapsed under their own weight. Pressure built at the centers of those clouds until the temperature reached 10 million degrees, and the atoms began fusing. The first stars ignited, not small, careful stars like our sun, enormous, reckless, blazing stars, many hundreds of times more massive than anything in our current sky, burning with a ferocity that lasted only a few million years before they detonated in spectacular explosions and scattered the first heavy elements across the darkness. Those elements became the building material for the next generation of stars, and those stars, enriched by what their predecessors had forged, became the building material for planets. And on at least one of those planets, 4.5 billion years ago, chemistry grew complex enough to produce life. For the first several billion years after the Big Bang, the universe expanded its star-making with gathering urgency. Galaxies formed from the concentrations of matter that gravity had been patiently assembling. They found each other in the dark. They collided. They merged. The collision of two galaxies is not a violent event in the way that word implies. It is slow and vast and takes hundreds of millions of years. But the gravitational effects of those mergers compressed enormous clouds of hydrogen, triggering great bursts of new star formation, flooding entire regions of space with the light of newly born suns. The universe was building, actively, prolifically, with a generosity of creation that it would not sustain. And then it reached its peak. Astronomers call it cosmic noon. It occurred approximately 10 billion years ago, when the universe was about 3.5 billion years old. At that moment, new stars were being born across the observable universe at a rate that had never been equaled before and will never be equaled again. The sky, had any eye existed to see it from any vantage point in the cosmos, would have blazed with 100 times the light you see tonight. Every direction would have been fire. Since that peak, the star formation rate of the universe has collapsed. The word is not too strong. It has fallen by more than 97%. Today, the cosmos forms new stars at roughly 3% of its historic maximum. 3%. The raw material, cold hydrogen gas, the only substance from which new stars can be assembled, is being consumed and not replenished. Galaxies that once blazed with new star birth have grown quiet. The great stellar nurseries, the vast clouds of gas and dust, where hundreds of stars once ignited simultaneously, are thinning. The fuel supply that built the universe is being spent down and not restocked. Astronomers who have spent careers studying this process have come to the same conclusion. No more than 5% of all the stars that will ever exist in the entire history of the universe will form from this point forward. 95% of the cosmos's creative output is already complete. We are not at the beginning, and we are not even in the middle. We are reading the last chapter of a book whose greatest pages were written billions of years before our planet existed. Here is what all of that data looks like when you draw it on a graph. The x-axis is time, 13.8 billion years, compressed into a single line. The y-axis is the rate at which the universe was making stars, its measure of productive activity, its vital sign. The curve rises. It peaks approximately 10 billion years ago. Then it falls, gently at first, then with increasing finality. The line does not flatten, it does not recover, it continues steadily toward a bottom it has not yet reached. Every person who has ever seen that graph has recognized its shape, not because they studied astrophysics, because they have watched someone age, because they have felt in their own body, and the specific difference between the energy available at 30 and the energy available at 60. Not a diminishment of value, not a collapse of the self, but an unmistakable change in capacity, in the effortlessness of production, in the ease with which new things come into being, because they have sat with someone they loved as that person moved through the different stages of the curve and felt the particular tenderness of knowing, without saying it, that the arc only goes one way, the universe runs that arc. And it is running it right now. Your body holds approximately 7 octillion atoms, 7 followed by 27 zeros, and virtually none of those atoms were manufactured on Earth. The hydrogen in the water that makes up most of you dates from the first minutes after the Big Bang, born before any star existed, and before any planet, before any chemistry more complex than a proton and an electron finding each other in the dark. The carbon that carries your thoughts was built in a stellar core. The oxygen you are breathing right now was forged in the nuclear furnace of a massive star operating at temperatures of several 100 million degrees. The iron moving through your blood was produced in the catastrophic death of a star so large that when it ran out of fuel, the shock wave of its collapse scattered its contents across light years of space. Carl Sagan spent his career trying to communicate what this actually means for the experience of being a human being in the universe. In 1980, in the opening episode of the television series Cosmos, he said, "The nitrogen in your DNA, the calcium in your teeth, the iron in your blood, and the carbon in your apple pies were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff. You are not living in the universe the way a fish lives in water, as something contained by its environment, something separate from the medium it moves through. You are made of the universe, which means that when you die, the universe is not losing a visitor. It is losing a piece of itself. More than that, it is losing the specific piece of itself that could perceive what was happening to it. But we are not ready for that yet. We need to sit with the decline a little longer first, because the full weight of the parallel we are drawing requires understanding not just that the universe is dying, but what that dying looks like from the inside. The universe is in its long afternoon. And we, by an accident of timing so precise it defies any probability calculation we know how to perform, arrived during it. We did not arrive at the beginning of the story or during its most productive chapter or at its peak of creation. We arrived late. We arrived in the decline. And what that means for the meaning of every day we have left is what this entire video is actually about. Scientists can draw the entire biography of the universe's creative power on a single graph. Every measurement from every telescope we have ever built, the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, ground-based observatories on 6 continents, radio telescopes picking up signals from galaxies so distant the light left them when the Earth had not yet formed. All of it converges on the same picture. The curve rises, it peaks, it falls. That graph is 10 billion years of cosmic history compressed into a shape that takes 3 seconds to perceive. And the thing that makes it extraordinary, the thing that stops people when they first really look at it, somewhere between the eyes and the chest, is not the scale, it is the familiarity. Because that shape is not abstract, that shape is a life, and you have been living inside it, the human version of it, for as long as you have been alive. The Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago. By that time, cosmic noon, the universe's peak of star-making creativity, had already been over for 5 billion years. Every mountain on this planet, every ocean basin, every continent, every organism that has ever breathed on this surface, all of it has unfolded during the universe's slow decline. Our entire planetary history is a footnote in the cosmos's long afternoon. We were born into the recession, not the boom. Think about what that means in human terms. You were born into a family, a country, a civilization, a species, a planet, and a universe that were all already well past their periods of most explosive growth. The epoch in which the raw material of existence was being assembled into its most complex forms had passed long before any ancestor of yours drew breath. You arrived not at the beginning of the story, not even close to the beginning, but deep into the third act, at a point when the arc of the whole has been set and the direction is established, and the only remaining question is how the remaining material will be spent. And yet, the third act is still going, the stars are still burning, and the galaxies are still turning, the universe's last 5%, the fraction of its total creative output still remaining, is still available, still being used, still producing light. You were born into the autumn of the cosmos, and autumn is not nothing. Autumn is the season when everything that has been building all year becomes visible, when the accumulated work of spring and summer shows its full color, when the light already going golden makes everything it touches more beautiful than it was in June. Let me tell you about a library. Imagine the greatest library that has ever existed. Not the largest building, but the most alive, the one where, at its peak, 300 scholars worked every single day, and new books arrived faster than anyone could catalogue them, and entire wings of the building had to be constructed to accommodate the previous decade's discoveries. You could not walk down any corridor without hearing arguments, passionate, productive arguments about things no one had ever thought to ask before. The air smelled of ink and coffee and the particular kind of excitement that belongs to rooms where ideas are being made, not merely discussed. People came from the far ends of the world to work inside it, because inside it, you felt like you were at the center of something still actively growing, still discovering, still in the middle of its own best chapter. That was 10,000 years ago. The library still stands. The shelves are full, fuller than they have ever been, in fact. Every book produced at the height of its power still sits on its shelf, still legible, still worth reading. Occasionally, a new book arrives, written by the smaller and older cohort of scholars who remain, who still care, who still come in every morning and sit at their desks and add to the record. The building is the same building, the windows are the same windows. The light comes in exactly as it always did. But there are 8 scholars now, not 300. The arguments have grown quieter, not because the questions are less interesting, but because there are fewer people to have them with. No new wings are being built. The last great debate ended 12 years ago, and no one has started another with quite the same intensity. The scholar who knows the catalogue most completely has been here for 50 years, and she knows the building better than she knows any other place on Earth. And she knows that what she walks through in the evenings is primarily a record of what was, not a forecast of what will be. She still works. Every morning she still arrives, still opens her notebooks, still adds to the record with a care and precision that has not diminished with the years. Her work is not made less by the context in which she does it. The books she writes are as true as the books produced at the height of the library's power. But she walks through the stacks in the evening light, running her fingers along the spines of the volumes, and she knows. The universe right now is that library, not empty, not silent, still producing light, still forming stars, still generating the conditions for chemistry and planets, and somewhere, and for the kind of consciousness that can walk through its own history and read what is written on the walls. But the 300 scholars are gone. The new wings are not being built. The direction is established, and it is not toward more. It is toward the long, quiet, honest completion of what was begun. This is not a universe fading to black. This is a universe in the long process of spending everything it has, converting its fuel into history, its potential into fact, its raw hydrogen into every star and planet and ocean and eye that will ever exist. And the fact that you are here during the spending, not during the accumulation, is not bad timing. It is the only timing available to anything capable of recognizing what it means. Think about what it means to witness something being spent. Wealth accumulating is unremarkable. It is private, invisible, the process of potential gathering itself in the dark. It is wealth being used, transformed into food and shelter and art and music, and the education of children and the care of the old, and every act of love that requires resources to sustain, that constitutes the actual point of having it. The universe accumulated its star-forming capacity for 3.5 billion years. It reached cosmic noon, and then it began to spend. Every star that has burned since that peak, including our sun, including the stars burning tonight above your roof, is part of the spending. Every photon that left a star and crossed the expanding space of the cosmos to reach your eye is part of the spending. You are receiving what the universe bought with 10 billion years of accumulation. You are the beneficiary of its expenditure, and you are the only part of the process that has ever been able to notice what is being given. But noticing requires something that the universe did not have for most of its history. Noticing requires consciousness, and consciousness, the specific, strange, improbable thing that makes this video possible, that makes the question possible, that makes the grief possible, arrived at the most extraordinary moment in the history of the cosmos. It arrived late. It arrived during the decline. It arrived, in effect, just in time to understand what was being lost. The universe woke up, and when it opened its eyes, the party was already winding down. The universe has existed for 13.8 billion years. For conscious life, as far as every instrument we have ever built and every calculation we have ever run can determine, has existed for perhaps 600 million years in its simplest multicellular forms, and for something closer to 300,000 years in the form of anatomically modern human beings capable of building fires, asking questions about the sky, and sitting alone at night wondering what all of this is for. 300,000 years against 13.8 billion. That ratio is so small it requires scientific notation to express. Approximately 0.0022%. Consciousness has occupied approximately 2/10,000ths of the universe's total history. If you compress all of cosmic time into a single calendar year, each month representing a little over 1 billion years, the first stars appear in February. The Earth forms in early September. Life begins on Earth in mid-September. The dinosaurs arrive on December 26th, and conscious human beings appear on December 31st, at approximately 11:59 p.m. and 48 seconds. 12 seconds before midnight. 12 seconds. And here is what those 12 seconds found when they arrived. A universe already past its peak. Already 10 billion years into its own decline. Already well along the curve from cosmic noon toward the long, cold, lightless end that physics has been building toward since the Big Bang. Consciousness showed up not at the beginning of the story, not at the moment of its greatest creative power, but deep into the third act, and it showed up as the only thing in the history of the cosmos capable of reading what was written on the walls. A Carl Sagan spent his career trying to communicate something that science states as fact, but the human mind resists absorbing as experience. In 1980, speaking directly to camera, he said, "The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself." People have quoted those 3 sentences for 45 years, usually as poetry, as a beautiful way of connecting human beings to the larger cosmos they inhabit, as a reminder that we are not separate from the stars. But Sagan was not offering metaphor. He was making a literal, structural, physical claim about the relationship between consciousness and the cosmos. And the claim is more extraordinary than the poetry suggests. For 13.8 billion years, for all but the last 12 seconds of the cosmic calendar, the universe existed without any mechanism for self-knowledge whatsoever. Stars burned, and there was nothing to register their light as beautiful, as information, as anything at all. Galaxies collided in vast slow-motion catastrophes that took hundreds of millions of years to complete, and there was no witness to measure the scale or feel the significance. The cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe, the direct echo of the Big Bang, carrying information about the state of the cosmos when it was 380,000 years old, propagated across the expanding darkness for 13 billion years, and there was no receiver tuned to its frequency. The universe existed, and it was magnificent, and it knew nothing about any of it. Then, and in the last 0.002% of its history, the universe arranged a small and temporary amount of its matter into a configuration complex enough to generate awareness, not merely the capacity to respond to stimuli. Single-celled organisms do that, thermostats do that. The capacity to ask questions about the nature of the thing asking the questions. The capacity to look at a star and feel wonder. The capacity to learn that the universe is dying and to grieve. That configuration is the human brain. That configuration is you, and every act of human perception, every moment of looking up at the sky and feeling something you cannot fully articulate, every morning you notice the light coming through a window. Every instant of genuine attention paid to the fact that you are alive is, in the most literal and physical sense, the universe perceiving itself. You are not watching the cosmos from the outside. You are a temporary aperture through which the cosmos watches itself, briefly, before the aperture closes. There is a thought experiment I want to use here, not as philosophy, as something more immediate. Imagine a painting that one morning becomes aware that it is a painting, not in a supernatural way. Simply the chemicals in the pigment reach a configuration complex enough to generate something like experience. The painting can suddenly perceive the texture of its own canvas. It can see the grain of the wood in the frame. It can sense, in some way it cannot yet articulate, that the brushstrokes that compose it were laid down by a hand that no longer holds the brush, at a time that is irretrievably past. It knows itself to be a finished thing, a thing made and then left. It understands that the making of it is complete, and what remains is only the fact of its existence, the work of being there, of occupying its place on the wall, of doing the thing a painting does, holding the light, catching the eye, offering something to whoever stops to look. And the painting faces a question that it did not face before it became aware. Is this awareness a gift? Does the capacity for self-knowledge, the ability to perceive its own colors, to feel the quality of the light falling on it, to know that it is here, enrich the painting's existence? Does it give the painting something it could not have had without it? Or is the awareness only the capacity to suffer, to know that the canvas will eventually deteriorate, that the colors will fade, that the frame will someday hold nothing, that the hand that made it is already gone, and every hand that has ever stood before it looking is also going, one by one? The answer is both, always both. The awareness that enables wonder enables grief. The capacity for beauty and the capacity for loss are the same capacity, and you cannot have one without accepting the other. The universe did not make us to suffer. It made us by accident, through the blind mechanics of physics and chemistry, and 4 billion years of evolution operating with no intention, no plan, no preference for any particular outcome. But in the act of becoming complex enough to produce minds, it gave itself both gifts simultaneously: the gift of knowing what it is and the cost of knowing what it is losing. We are the place where the universe became aware of its own finitude. We are the mirror that arrived late enough to catch the decline in progress, and the grief we feel for the people we love and the years that pass and the world that changes and the light that fades is not separate from the grief that the universe would feel if it had a way to feel anything. Through us, it does. Through us, it does. You are not grieving in spite of the cosmos. You are the cosmos, grieving. And the fact that the universe produced something capable of that, in the last fraction of its history, in the period of its own decline, with no more reason or plan than physics provides, is the most extraordinary fact I know. Human beings have carried this knowledge, the knowledge of their own mortality, the weight of finitude, of the awareness that the light goes out, for as long as they have been human. And for as long as they have carried it, the greatest minds among them have been asking the same question. Does that knowledge diminish life, or does it constitute it? The answer that the best of them arrived at is the one that the universe's own biography confirms. But you need to hear the argument, not just the conclusion. Every philosophical tradition that has ever taken death seriously, not as a problem to be solved, not as a catastrophe to be avoided, but as the central and unavoidable fact of human existence, has arrived eventually at the same territory. The language differs. The cultural framework differs. The particular concepts they reached for differ enormously. But the discovery is the same. It predates our knowledge of star formation rates by 2,000 years. It predates our understanding of dark energy by 24 centuries. It predates the telescope, the radio telescope, the space telescope, the entire edifice of modern astrophysics. And yet it is the same discovery the physics is now confirming. Death is not the opposite of life. It is life structure, the thing that makes everything inside it real. Martin Heidegger was not a comfortable philosopher. He built his major work, Being and Time, on an argument that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. That authentic human existence, the experience of actually inhabiting your own life, as opposed to performing it, or deferring it, or drowning it in the noise of what everyone else is doing and thinking and wanting, is only possible for a being that faces its own death with open eyes. Not death in the abstract, not death as a concept, its own death. Specific, personal, final, and absolutely unavoidable. He called the concept being toward death. Not dying, Heidegger was not interested in the clinical moment of cessation. Being toward death is a way of existing right now, in the present, in which the reality of your own end is not suppressed but acknowledged, held, kept visible as the fact that gives every choice its weight. When you know you are going to die, really know it. Not as an intellectual position, but as a felt reality that you do not daily anesthetize with distraction. Then every choice you make carries a significance that infinite time would dissolve. You cannot defer forever. You cannot always do the thing you actually want to do next decade. The deadline is real, and it is close, and it is yours alone. No one can die your death for you. No one can take it away or distribute it or negotiate its terms. And that inalienable specificity, that absolute belonging of your death to you and no one else, is, for Heidegger, the thing that makes your life inalienably yours. He did not have the cosmic data. He was not thinking about star formation rates or the expansion of the universe or the long decline of the cosmos toward heat death. And he was thinking about a person walking down a street on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. But the mechanism he identified is the same mechanism the astrophysics confirms. Finitude generates weight. Remove the deadline and every decision dissolves. The consciousness that lives forever and the universe that never ends share the same problem. Nothing in infinite time can mean anything. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome for nearly 20 years, the most powerful human being alive in the largest and most sophisticated political structure the Western world had yet produced. With armies and infrastructure and the administrative apparatus of an empire operating across 3 continents. He had every reason the world can offer to believe that his existence was significant, his decisions consequential, his name permanent. He spent his private journals reminding himself that none of it would last. Memento mori. Remember you will die, not as a warning, not as a punishment, not as the morbid indulgence of a man made anxious by his own power, as the most clarifying and liberating fact available to a human mind. The thought that cuts through all the noise and all the pretension and all the self-deception and leaves you standing very simply in front of the question, what do I actually want to do with the time I have? He wrote in the notebooks he kept for his own counsel, words that were not intended for any reader. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. It is not an invitation to despair. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most effective and, by the accounts of those who lived under him, are one of the most humane administrators in the history of the empire. It is an invitation to precision. To stop spending your finite hours on things that will not, when you reach the end of them, have been worth the spending. Albert Camus looked at the universe and found exactly what the physics finds. Silence. The stars do not answer. The structure of matter does not validate your choices or reward your virtue or confirm your importance. The cosmos is, in his word, benignly indifferent. It is not against you. It simply has no position on you, no investment in your particular existence, no mechanism by which it could respond to what you ask of it. And he called the collision between this silence and the human need for meaning the absurd, not a philosophical position, the actual texture of being alive. And Camus refused to collapse. His response was not acceptance and not nihilism, it was rebellion. Not against the universe, which cannot be rebelled against, but against the temptation to pretend the situation is other than it is. To live fully, honestly, passionately, in full possession of the knowledge that no external validation is coming and that meaning must be made, not found. To push the boulder up the hill not because someone put it there for a reason, but because you have decided that the pushing is yours and the hill is yours. And the particular quality of effort you bring to it is something the universe, for all its indifference, has never produced before. Heidegger, Aurelius, Camus, and Sagan, who carried the same insight into physics and found it confirmed at the scale of galaxies. They arrived at the same place from different centuries and different disciplines and different temperaments. Death is not the opposite of life, it is life's structure, the boundary that makes the inside of things visible. A room without walls is not a room. A story without an ending is not a story. It is only noise. A universe that ran forever would be unmeasurable and therefore incomprehensible and therefore meaningless in the only way that matters. It could not be experienced as anything in particular because there would always be more of it and more after that, and nothing would ever be the thing that closed the shape. You are not the first person to stand in front of this knowledge. You are standing in a long line, 2,500 years of people who looked clearly at the same fact you are looking at and found, at the other side of it, not despair, but something harder and more durable than comfort. What they found is what we need to feel now, not merely understand. And feeling it requires going somewhere that intellectual argument cannot take you. I want you to consider, very carefully, what you would lose if you were immortal, not what you would gain. Everyone has imagined that, the accumulated knowledge, the centuries of experience, the relationships that would not have to end. I am asking about what would go. You would lose urgency. Every conversation could be deferred. Every person you have been meaning to call, you could call them next decade. And every morning you almost stopped and looked at the sky and didn't. There would be another morning tomorrow, and another after that, and another after that, stretching on with no horizon. The specific pressure of time that forces attention, the knowledge, quiet and constant, that this particular day is a finite resource, would dissolve. And without that pressure, attention would dissolve with it. The sky would become wallpaper. The people you love would become permanent fixtures, which means they would eventually become invisible. The way the furniture in a room you have occupied for years becomes invisible. Only the new things catch the eye. An immortal being would eventually run out of new things to see. You would lose weight. Without the possibility of loss, nothing can be precious. This is not a philosophical preference. It is a feature of how perception operates. Scarcity is not a flaw in the design of experience. It is the mechanism by which experience registers as real. The things you have loved most intensely in your life, the people, the places, the specific quality of light on a particular afternoon that you have never been able to fully describe but have never been able to forget. You loved them with that exact intensity because some part of you knew they were temporary, knew that this afternoon would not come back, knew that these years with this person were a finite gift, not an infinite resource. Remove that knowledge and you remove the intensity. An immortal life would feel like nothing, because nothing would feel like anything that could be lost, and you would lose yourself. Without the pressure of finitude, you drift. This is what Heidegger understood and spent 600 pages trying to say. Without the deadline, without the specific gravity of your own mortality, pulling every choice toward what actually matters, you dissolve into the anonymous comfort of doing what everyone does and thinking what everyone thinks. You stop being a particular person making particular choices in a particular life. You become a kind of averaging. You become the sum of your distractions. The deadline is not the enemy of the life. The deadline is what makes the life legible. Everything you love is beautiful because it is temporary. The people you love most acutely are the ones you know you will lose, or have already lost, and carry with you in the specific way that loss teaches you to carry things. The evenings that feel most real are the ones where the light is already going golden, already in the process of becoming dark. The moments that carve themselves permanently into your memory, that stay with you through years and changes and everything that accumulates in a long life, are the ones you are genuinely present for. The ones where something in you recognized, in real time and without words, that this would not come again. That is not a flaw in the design. That is the design. And the universe, your universe, the one you are literally assembled from, the one that has been burning its way toward darkness for 13.8 billion years, works by the same logic. The stars are beautiful because they are burning their last hydrogen. Every photon leaving a star is an atom of fuel spent and not replaced. The sky is extraordinary tonight because it is temporary. The full blazing visible cosmos, the 2 trillion galaxies within our cosmological horizon, the ancient light that has crossed billions of light years to reach your eye, will not always be there. 100 billion years from now, the galaxies beyond our local group will have drifted beyond the point where their light can reach us. A future observer in the Milky Way will look out into a darkness they will have no way to know was ever anything else. The window of a full and knowable and observable universe is open right now, tonight, and you live in it. You are not a passenger in the universe. You are the universe's only functioning eye during the most visually extraordinary era it has ever known or will ever know again. Because you are mortal, and this conversation matters. Because you are mortal, the person across the table from you matters. Not as a category, not as a type, not as a feature of your social landscape, but specifically, irreplaceably, with the full weight of everything that particular person has meant to you and everything they have not yet meant. Because you are mortal, the light coming through your window this morning was not ambient noise. It was information, evidence that the day had arrived and you were still here to receive it. That the agreement between you and the world had been renewed for another day. Because you are mortal, you notice things that an immortal being would stop noticing after the first 100 years. The specific quality of silence in a room after someone has just said something true. The exact weight of a hand. The way grief feels different from sadness. Sadness different from loneliness. Loneliness different from the particular ache of loving something you know is temporary, which is every single thing you have ever loved, without exception. Because you are mortal, you are the only arrangement of matter in 13.8 billion years of cosmic history that has ever perceived the stars as something worth stopping for, not as navigational aids, not as sources of gravitational influence, as something to look at, as something that creates in the chest of a thing that evolved on a small wet rock around one unremarkable star, a feeling that has no name in physics and that physics could not predict, and that physics, for all its power, has never been able to fully account for. And the feeling of standing under the sky at night and knowing you are part of something larger than you can hold. And because the universe is mortal, because it runs the same arc you run, because it moves toward the same darkness you move toward, because the light that fills the sky tonight is finite and finite and finite and will not be replenished. Your grief is not a private wound. Your grief is the universe feeling its own condition through the only instrument it has ever produced that can feel anything at all. You are not grieving in spite of the cosmos. You are grieving as the cosmos. You are the grief of the universe, made conscious, made personal, made bearable by the fact that you are here to feel it. That is not a small thing. That is the largest thing. Every tradition in human history has offered some version of the same hope, that death is not the end, that something continues, that the self, in some form, persists beyond the dissolution of the body that carried it. This video does not argue for or against any version of that hope. What you believe about what happens after is yours, and it belongs to a realm of inquiry that physics cannot enter. But there is another kind of completion, one that does not require an afterlife to be true, and does not require materialism to be satisfying, one that is available to anyone, regardless of what they believe about the nature of consciousness or the existence of the soul. When you die, the atoms that constitute you will not cease to exist. The carbon that has been carrying your thoughts for decades will continue. The oxygen that has been moving through your blood will continue. The calcium, the iron, the nitrogen, the trace elements assembled from the debris of dead stars billions of years ago, all of it will continue, moving into the slow chemistry of whatever comes next. Soil, water, air, the long, thin medium between stars. Whatever the cosmos is still building from its remaining material, which will be less spectacular than the blazing galaxies of cosmic noon, but will still, in its quiet way, be something. You were never separate from the universe to begin with. This is not a metaphor. You are a temporary local concentration of its matter, assembled by billions of years of physics into a configuration capable of the extraordinary and improbable thing we have been discussing for the past half hour. When that configuration disassembles, the matter returns. Not to you. You will be gone, and no version of you will exist to experience the return. But to the thing you were always part of, the thing you have been part of since before the first atom in your body was made, before the star that made it was born, before the galaxy that held that star had taken shape. You return to what you came from. Carl Sagan, who understood this as well as anyone, said, "Some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return, and we can, because the cosmos is also within us. We are made of star stuff. The atoms return. What does not return is the particular arrangement, the specific geometry of one life, the exact contour of one set of memories, every person who has ever loved you and every person you have ever lost, and everything that passed between you. The particular way you love the people you love, compounded of every shared year and private reference and moment of sitting in a room together without needing to speak. The thoughts that have been yours and no one else's. The specific texture of consciousness that has looked out of your eyes at 1,000 skies and felt 1,000 versions of the same unnamed thing. The atoms return, the thoughts do not, and it is the thoughts, the specific, irreplaceable, utterly unrepeatable thoughts, that the universe will not make again. Which is why the last thing this video will say is about exactly that. About what it means for one particular configuration of the universe's matter to have existed, briefly, blazing, and then to go. Look up again. The same sky. The same stars your ancestors called by names in languages no longer spoken. The same light that crossed billions of years of expanding space, through the thinning medium between galaxies, through the long cold dark between stars, through the atmosphere of a small blue planet circling a medium-sized sun in the outer arm of a spiral galaxy that is, by cosmic standards, unremarkable in every way except one, to reach your eye on this specific night. The light left its source before your grandparents were born. In some cases, before your civilization existed. In some cases, before life on Earth had yet developed the machinery of a nervous system. It traveled all that distance, through all that time, and arrived. Tonight. Here. You were here to receive it. The universe did not arrange itself to produce you. There was no intention. No plan laid out across 13.8 billion years with you as the destination. There was only hydrogen following physics, gravity following hydrogen, chemistry following the conditions that gravity created, biology following chemistry across 4 billion years of trial and error and extinction and improbable survival, and then the particular sequence of meetings and choices and accidents that produced the specific two people whose union produced you, and the specific sequence of moments that have shaped you since. No design, no guarantee, only the blind forward motion of matter doing what matter does. And from all of that, from the sheer mechanical operation of the universe following its own rules with no awareness of any of it, something happened that had never happened anywhere in the observable cosmos, as far as every instrument we have ever built can determine. Something looked back. You are not only a human being, you are a particular one. You carry the exact geometry of one life, the weight of specific losses that no one else has lost in precisely the way you have lost them, the specific warmth of specific joys that have come to you and not to anyone else. In exactly the configuration they came to you, the private register of everything that has mattered and everything that has broken you and everything you have chosen to love in full knowledge that it was temporary, which is everything you have ever loved. Every thought you have had that came to you at 3 in the morning in the particular dark of your particular bedroom, in the particular year it came. Every sentence that changed you, every silence that did. The universe has existed for 13.8 billion years. It has produced approximately 10 to the power of 27 configurations of matter, complex enough to generate consciousness. But it has never produced yours. Not before your birth, not in any galaxy at any other moment in the history of the cosmos, not after your death. The specific arrangement of atoms and memories and relationships and half-formed ideas that constitutes you is irreplaceable. Not because the universe values it, not because it is cosmically important in any sense that physics can measure, but because it is specific. And specificity is irreplaceable by definition. What is unique cannot be replaced. What is unrepeatable cannot be repeated. What goes when you go is gone from the universe's total account of itself, and that account will never include it again. You were not born into this universe. You were born as it, a temporary sharpening of 13.8 billion years into one brief blazing point of awareness. When you go, that point goes with you, and the universe, vast and ancient and already dying, will never have that exact thought again.